Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Great America Show. It's great to have you with us tonight. President Trump now on his second day out in the Middle East, where he's raising some money. He's doing a little bit of fundraising, I guess you can say. It's not for himself, as the Marxist mainstream media would make you believe. It's not to pick up a brand new or slightly used 747 aircraft that's being gifted to America. But he's out there doing some business negotiations. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. First, I want to bring to you guys the rousing applause that President Trump got on his first stop in Saudi Arabia. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. President Trump bringing Lee Greenwood, not physically, but out to Saudi Arabia. That was a room packed full of people, perhaps more people than he does here in America, and he does a lot, far bigger than anybody. It's nice to see a president respected on the world stage again. For the last 4 years, we had a president who was not only disrespected, not respected, but just made a total fool of himself every single place he went, whether it was falling down steps, falling up steps, falling on stages, incoherent, not audible. The list goes on of things that were wrong with Joe Biden. So to have President Trump back out there on the world stage, it's truly remarkable. So just over 100 days in office, I think it's 113 now, President Trump has secured $5.2 trillion in investments abroad here in America, signing a bill with Saudi Arabia yesterday, $600 billion. But President Trump says they've made a lot more money since his last time in office, where they originally made a $600 billion pledge. So he's going to ask him perhaps for $1 trillion. We'll see how that holds off. If anyone's able to do it, it's President Trump with that massive China deal he was able to get through. Market's absolutely loving it, still reacting. Before he left for the White House, we brought you the other day about the healthcare initiative that President Trump had signed his executive order. And it laid out 3 key points. It was a 30-day deadline for price reductions for pharmaceutical companies to lower their drug prices to align with the international rates. Failure to comply will result in regulatory action. Number 2, targeting the middlemen. The order criticizes pharmaceutical benefit managers and companies like CVS and Cigna for inflating their costs and leading to market reaction, where Cigna shares dropped nearly 6% and CVS over 3% on the news of this bill. And he wants to combat anti-competitive practices. The FTC is urging to address anti-competitive behaviors in pharmaceutical sectors. Because it doesn't really make much sense, folks. You can go across the border up into even Canada, and I hate to say this, or go to Europe. You can go into any drugstore and you can get ibuprofen, you can get amoxicillin, you can get, in some countries, you can even buy anabolic steroids over the counter. I've seen in places over in Europe, and you're able to get this stuff over the counter. Whereas here in America, you got to go to a doctor, you've got to pay a copay to go see a doctor, then you've got to get the prescription called in, and then you've got to go pay the prescription. If you got bad insurance, prescription's going to cost you a little bit more, whereas other countries, you literally just walk in and you say, I have a cold and I know what fixes my cold. And it's Z-Pak, it's amoxicillin, $3, $4, they got it. So it'll be nice to see America start to wean towards that and save Americans some money. But it doesn't come without opposition, of course. House Senate Majority Leader John Thune saying the other day that Trump's intentions are clear. Codifying the executive order into law may be fairly controversial in Congress. Now, this is something that both Republicans and Democrats have promised for years. As long as I'm alive, as long as a lot of you, or probably some of you are still alive or alive, they've promised to bring down drug prices. They guaranteed they were going to do it in a campaign promise, and they were never able to do it. It was all just banter and lies. Now President Trump does it, and we've got someone on the Republican side, John Thune, supposed to be America first, supposed to be the man leading the Republican Party. And all of a sudden, he says it's going to present some problems. Whereas over on the House side, Ro Khanna, a Democrat, a Marxist Dem from California, said he would be honored to introduce the bill into Congress to be bipartisan legislation. This is a Democrat. Yet we have the Republicans saying it might be a problem. And it's not just any Republican, it's the Senate Majority Leader. But this is what we constantly have to deal with. This is what the Republican Party constantly has to deal with. And I know a lot of you, hear me say, come out here every day and say, go after these rhinos and go after these people, but enough is enough. I mean, how much are we supposed to put up with these people undermining the America First agenda? Enough is enough. But it's not just John Thune. You folks probably all remember, we told you the story 2 weeks ago. Senator Rand Paul, he was garnering support in the Senate to try to overturn President Trump's tariffs. Those same tariffs that now have backed China into a corner, have backed Canada into a corner, have backed like 99% of the world into a corner to give us level playing field, to give us more fair trade deals. But Rand Paul and a few rhinos and some Marxist Dems thought it would be a good idea. Now, it ultimately failed, and President Trump would have vetoed it. But Rand Paul, the reason I say this is Rand Paul was on Jesse Waters' show this week, and to Jesse's credit, I'm not a fan of Jesse's, but I've got to give credit where credit is due. He absolutely takes him to task. Take a listen.
Well, Senator, you were panicking. You were against the tariffs. You were anti-tariff. Now, what do you have to say?
Jesse, I'm a free market guy. I think international trade creates great wealth, and there's all the facts and history of the last 100 years to prove it. But I'm also a friend of Donald Trump's. I'm a supporter of Donald Trump's. When he has successes with trade, I've said I will compliment him. If he succeeds in lowering tariffs and lessening the obstacles to trade, I'll be right there. I think it's unknown with China. We started out at 145%, then we went to 80%, now we're at 30%. But that's 30% more than we have on currently. So this will be a 30% rise in any goods who are coming from China, and somebody will pay that. It will be the consumer. If the consumer's happy to pay more when they go to Walmart or more when they go to Target in order to get fairness or to teach China a lesson, then so be it. But the proof is in the pudding. We'll see what happens over the next 6 months to a year.
So you think our defense industry should rely on the Chinese? You think we should rely on Chinese steel? You trust China?
No, I think there are exceptions to trade and exceptions to free international trade. One of them would be defense industries. We obviously aren't going to buy our, intercontinental ballistic missiles from them. We're not going to have enriched uranium coming from China. So our defense industry is completely independent and needs to be. And there are even some things that aren't necessary for defense that I would say we ought to make here. The flag, for goodness sake.
Or pharmaceuticals. So you don't want pharmaceuticals coming from China.
No, well, actually, I don't. But here's the thing is there's a real question. This is a serious question you ask conservatives. How do you want to bring a pharmaceutical industry to our country? Do you want to do it by reducing taxes or raising taxes? The president thinks if you raise taxes on imports, which Americans will pay, that it will encourage local industry. Another way of doing it is China makes like 4 different antibiotics. They're generic. There's not much profit in them. What we should do is lower the taxes to 0 for 10 years for anybody who will compete with them in our country. So it's just a matter of perspective. I would rather taxes. Raising taxes or tariffs is not my cup of tea.
A lot of lies in that statement from Rand Paul, and I particularly used to like Rand Paul. He mentioned a 30% rise on products. Not true. The 145% tariff was on for a few weeks. If Senator Paul can show me a product that was raised 145%, I'd go buy that product. Total lie, blatant lie, and he knows it's a lie. That's not true. There was no product, not one product, where 145% tariff was consumed by the American consumer. Not even half of that, not even a quarter of that. Now the 30% tariff, to that I say the same thing. So what Rand Paul said is a blatant lie when it comes to those tariffs. As I said, if he can find something that the American consumer paid 145% more on, I'll go buy that product, and I'll buy some for the audience as well, because it's a blatant lie.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, MyPillows, towels, slippers, blankets.
I'm interrupted this commercial to do something I've never done before. Get 2 MyPillows absolutely free on orders of $100 or more. I can't do this forever, so get on board with this great sale today. Our best-selling 6-piece bath towel sets or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Our famous standard MyPillows, only $14.98. Queens, $18.98. King size, only $1 more. Body pillows, $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our spring percale Giza Dream bed sheet sets. Any size, any color. So go to MyPillow.com or call that number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And when you spend $100 or more, get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
Folks, I want to bring in our guest today, a great friend of the show, a great American, former senior NSA intel analyst and whistleblower, the great Russ Tice, our go-to on deep state and everything that has to do with government corruption. Russ, first, I got to ask you, how you doing? It's been a while.
I'm doing all right, except I'm giving around a little bit. For the knees are not what they used to be. Too many years on the football field when I was a young buck.
So I hear as you get older, things start to hurt. And I think I'm starting to feel it now, Russ. I go out and I play a round of golf, and I can't go out the next day. It's embarrassing, but you know what? I guess it's the price I pay for getting old. Russ, I want to start with first. Like I said, it's been a little while, and it's great to have you back with us here on the intel community right now. I want to get your assessment first, just a broad overhaul on how you think things are going. I often come on this show, Russ, and I report the news, and some people aren't happy with me with my assessment of some people like Pam Bondi, but all I do is report the news and let them make a decision for themselves. Some people say I'm going too hard on them, so that's why I want you on here. I want to get your assessment on how these people are doing as a man who's lived it and worked it his entire life, so people can stop blaming me, saying I'm telling them they're doing a bad job. You may disagree with me.
Well, you know, we just saw a few weeks ago where the director of NSA and the deputy got fired, which I think was a great thing. That should have been like day 2 of the Trump administration, in my opinion. But there's a whole entourage of senior executives that are underneath of that need to be culled. And I'm not sure that the folks we have in the Trump administration that should be doing that have the ability to be able to ferret out the riffraff and the cancer that needs to be cut out. So as far as I've heard about they're talking about 1,000 or something people that they want to lay off. Well, I mean, are they talking about just some GS 5 that just got hired?
Where is that? Where do they want to lay them off?
I heard that a couple of weeks ago that they're talking about a few layoffs of like 1,000 or so people.
And which agency?
NSA, and I think CIA too. That they're talking about. They're talking about, I think, giving early outs or doing the incentive thing and that sort of stuff. But
these are two agencies with, we don't know the actual numbers on them, but I have to presume it's in the hundreds of thousands, correct?
Well, the last time I checked,
there's a public number out there somewhere. I think one of the times we had you on the show, I pulled up an old declassified list where there's, all 17 or 18 agencies, there was a few million people. So the CIA number is not a public number, but I have to assume that between those two agencies, the NSA, CIA, between contractors and stuff, there's got to be a few 100,000 people. So what is really 1,000 people?
It's a drop in the bucket. And like I said, unless you're surgically going in and cutting out the bad apples, you might have some decent people that are saying, I've had enough of this, and I'm out of here. Yeah, I'll take your incentive pay or whatever. Right. And if it's a young person who's just out of school and they're worthwhile, then you're cutting out a future person that's worthwhile. So this haphazard way of just we're going to cut from the bottom and we're going to incentive people that have been there for a while out. That's not going to get the people out that are the deep staters that are right now. They're just hunkering down and they're just waiting for the Trump administration to go away. And like I said before, all you're going to get if you're Tulsi Gabbard is bells and whistles, smoke and mirrors, and dog and pony shows. Just to placate you and just to give you a big wow, and because she doesn't understand enough about the inner workings of the agencies of the intel service, she won't know. And I don't think that she's hired people that do know her, her lieutenants. So that's right now the intel folks are just the the ones that are the gators in the swamp, they're just hunkering down.
To me, it seems, and I want to go through each one of these people because I want to get your assessment on each one of them. Tulsi, I sort of agree with your assessment a little bit that she's, sort of a neophyte in this realm. She was a military member of the military. She was a congresswoman, but nobody really knows the level, Russ, until you get into that NXA, until you get into the DNI, the ONDI, whatever agency you're working in. Nobody really knows the nature of the beast because I don't think anyone's, who's in there before us in this administration has held the security clearance high enough to really understand the depth of the deep state, to really understand the depth of what goes on and how things are done and covert operations and so on and so forth. So Tulsi Gabbard, I have to give her credit. She's one of the few who's come out publicly, went out on the limb and done interviews. And I'm not saying Pam Bondi doesn't do interviews because she does far too many interviews, but Tulsi Gabbard from day one has done everything that President Trump has asked her. President Trump wanted a review of those 51 intel chiefs who put out that fake Hunter Biden Russian laptop disinformation story, pulled those security clearances. President Trump asked her to look into the 2020 election, to start looking into it. She has. Within 2 weeks has come out and said that we know election machines are vulnerable. This is from our DNI. Okay, this is from our government. This isn't John Fawcett. This isn't Lou Dobbs. This isn't Tucker Carlson going on television. Even though when it was said 4 years ago, we all got sued for it. We now know it's true. Fox paid $787 million, even though they knew it was true, which makes you wonder, are they complicit or stupid? And I think it's the first. So Tulsi Gabbard has hit the ground running. Now, I understand there are some snakes who are underneath her who presumably she can't find. What is your assessment as it turns to Tulsi? Now, I understand, what you had said that, she's a novice to the job. Are you confident that in due time, within 6 months to a year, she can start rooting out some of these bad folks?
Well, I mean, her experience in the military, I think she was an Army medic. And matter of fact, I have a nephew, and I'm flying. Me and my wife are flying out to Texas next month because he's graduating to be an Army medic from Fort Sam Houston. So we're all excited about him graduating to his arduous, his really tough first duty station is going to be Hawaii. So I wish I had that sort of thing when I was in the military. But of course, there's a lot of the Air Force folks there too. But anyhow, she's not a spook. That's fine. I think she has the will. I certainly don't think she's compromised. And certainly a lot of them are. But I just don't think she's got the knowledge herself. A lot of these programs, the nefarious things that are going on are hidden in the SAP programs, like the domestic spying on Americans. The technology should not have reached the level of a black program, but they hid it in a black program because of the special security apparatus that a black program had. They did that on purpose so that very few people at NSA would even know to hide it. These things are deeply hidden. Just so happens, I specialized in nothing but black programs when I was at NSA and at DIA, and with half of that stuff when I worked for the Department of the Navy before that. But she needs some hardened spooks that know where things are to come on board, and she's got the right spirit, but she just doesn't have the background, and she needs the right people to be there to help her. And right now, I just don't. I assume she brought her own entourage, her own folks with her, and they got clearances, which is fine. So you bring a whole bunch of neophytes along, and then their eyes get wide, and when they see the bells and whistles, when the person that looks as a real spook looks at that and realizes this is nothing but smoke being blown up their caboose. So as far as I can tell, we used to think six months. I don't see, unless she gets the right people, that 6 months is going to make a difference.
Interesting. You mentioned SAP programs, and that's a good point that I never even thought of, that all the bad stuff they're doing is hidden in SAP programs. How many would you guess how many SAP programs are being run right now under her eyes that are undermining American democracy, run by the deep state, I guess, for lack of a better term?
There's a lot of SAP programs out there. And when I did my one deep set testimony with Congress, where we went into the bowels of the Capitol in the skiff there for SAP skiff, I think I had three or four of the only staffers of all of DC, of all the Congress that could hear what I could tell them. It was like four of them only. So we had an interesting discussion where, one of the programs I knew about, they didn't even know about themselves.
Yeah.
We call them ghost programs. And they're all looking at me. They're like, are you sure that that's there? And, I'm like, absolutely. And they're like writing notes, and their eyes are darting back and forth. But because they themselves are supposedly the four staffers who had pinball, or what do they call them? Kingpin clearances. Well, kingpin means everything, by the way. And they had no clue. So they told me when they did the write-up that I had 199 SAP clearances. Now, that sounds impressive, but some of those are duplicates, where they have one program it's in the intel world, it's called one thing, and in the defense world, it's called another. And they do that so when they go to a hearing, they can be deceptive and tell one group that they tell the intel committees that it's a DOD SAP, and they tell the Department of Defense committee folks that it's an intel SAP. So they don't have to. They just it's a little shell game back and forth. So they do that on purpose. And there's some programs that I would like. For instance, you have Tony Schaefer on your program periodically.
Very often.
Well, Tony, before he went overseas with Able Danger, he needed some technical support from DIA. And I'll just say that the Army guy had that Army contract. His name was Harry. I'll just say Harry. But he drags me over to Fort Belvoir, and that's the first time I meet Tony Schaefer. And Tony Schaefer was running that program. And let me tell you, what you know about that program there's a whole lot more to that Tony Schaefer has never told the world, because he can't, because of the dark black nature of it. But he needed some technical help, and I said, yeah, I can do that for you when you get over there. And then I was soon to follow. I was there for 5 months, pretty soon after that myself. But so I helped him out and got him what he needed. But I was never read into the program that he was in. But or in some cases that will happen, and they'll read me in for like a week to give them a week or two to get the technology they need or whatever's going on, or the satellite capabilities, space support or something or other. And so, and then you get read out. There's a thing called a bigot list, and they're very strict in the SAP world. That's only a certain amount of people at any one time are allowed to be read into the program. So, and if the bigot list is 25 people, then that's it. If they want to bring me in for 2 weeks to give them some special aid, and if they've already reached the limit of 25, they got to read someone out just to have me in for 2 weeks, and then read me out, bring them back in. That's how strict the bigot list is. So they're self-contained. Security is self-controlled. They're not part of the major. Nobody at another desk, the Mideast desk, can reach in there and see what these SAP programs are. And most of the time, when you go overseas, you're there to do this mission, and they slide you in as if you're someone doing something else. And you're waiting to be pinged on to do what you have to do. And sometimes the mission gets scratched, and you don't do the mission. It's sort of like a horse race. We got the Preakness coming up here in Baltimore real soon, and it's like a horse that gets scratched at the last minute. So it's a touchy world, and it's so much. It's everything it can be hidden very easily, where you hide stuff, and Miss Gabbard could easily they could brush over it, and she wouldn't even have a clue that that's what they've done.
Now, Russ, folks, for those of you who are following, a SAP is a special access program. It's a program that's run very covertly. Sometimes the president doesn't even know about it. Sometimes the head of the Pentagon doesn't know about it. Everyone's different. truly fascinating. By the way, for those of you questioning, Russ's capabilities, Russ called me the day that those drones were flying over New Jersey, which is, I don't know, I guess it's a year ago or so now. Those drones that were flying over New Jersey near the airports and this and that. And Russ said, this is a special access program. This isn't aliens. This isn't that. This isn't this. This is a special access program that I believe is being run by the government for a certain mission that you wouldn't tell me what you believed it was. By the way, I've never questioned that you were, whistleblowers get a bad rep. I've never questioned, Russ, if you're a good American or an honorable American. I've spoken to you so many times where you've held back things that you said because you said, I just can't tell you that. A man who's a bad whistleblower or a traitor to his country, as some would suggest, would have no problem saying things like that. I know you'd only to be an honorable person. So anything they say about you, they can tuck it. But Russ called me after that, and he said, this is exactly what it was. You just wait and see. So I said, you want to come on air and say that? Absolutely. Russ comes on air the next day, and we discuss it. Lo and behold, folks, Donald Trump comes into office, and we find out 6 to 8 months later that what Russ Tice told us all, you didn't have to wait for it to be declassified. What Russ Tice told us all turned out to be absolutely 100% correct and true. So for those of you questioning, does Russ Tice know what he's talking about? I would believe so. The great Lou Dobbs relied heavily on Russ Tice for a lot of our information on this show. So I certainly trust Russ and his take on a lot of things. Russ, let's turn to the intel side, I guess, or the defense side, whatever way you want to look at it, to Pam Bondi. Now, she's one that I come on here every day and have an issue with. And I think a lot of us have the right to take issue with this woman. She spends most of her time on Fox News talking about whatever goes on there. It's like she doesn't care about doing her job as Attorney General. Excuse me. She cares about media appearances and her next job. Give me your assessment of Pam Bondi and the job she's done in just over 100 days.
Well, I mean, the whole thing with the Epstein files, she supposedly, they're on my desk. She releases them, and she has some influencers or something there. These people all think they've just been given the golden handbook of secrets or something to
Willy
go
Wonka ticket.
It's been buggering these little girls, and it turns out to be a wish-wash. So and apparently she never read it herself. So that tells me she's not paying attention. So I know I'm sure she's got a lot to do. There's all these criminals that have come over the border, and they got to round them all up, and that's a big thing. And there's a lot to do that she's involved with. But I'm still trying to give her leeway and say, okay, it's still just a little 100 days into the process here. So I'm trying to give her leeway, and the same thing with like Dan Bongino, who interestingly enough, that many months ago, I had to warn him because of an email I sent him that it got the FBI apparently screwed up, and they sent the response that said, "Hey, this is Bob, and I'm forwarding this on for filing." So I called Bongino and I said, "Hey." I said, remember I told you they're more than likely. And then I contacted, after years, I finally contacted a source at NSA to get me an idea what was going on from security type stuff. And finally the response came back, yes, Bongino at that time, just several months ago, was being, all his comms were targeted by the FBI through NSA. And so was Tucker Carlson's comms being everything. Tucker Carlson got upset because they watched his comms when he made a phone call to Moscow or something. It's not Tucker, buddy. Hey, it's not just your Moscow comms. It's anything you're doing comms. It's every email you send. If you have a nephew, a little kid, and you say happy birthday and send him a Red Ryder BB gun, it's the NSA and the FBI know about it. So, and it's some other, so these people have been doing this just not too long ago. So one of Bongino's terms is, I want to see the receipt. So I forwarded him the email, and I said, unless you got somebody named Bob working for you who categorizes your comm stuff, Dan, I said, you're being watched. And by the way, I just confirmed it with some folks at NSA. So he finally realized that, so now he's the deputy director of the FBI.
Wait, you're saying you sent a personal email to his personal email?
Yes. Yeah.
And you got a response from the FBI?
Yes. Yeah.
And when you spoke to Dan, was he a little bit concerned?
I think I watched one of his shows where he said something like, I've talked to the whistleblower and I know you're watching me and I don't give a crap, or something like that. So that's what he said on one of his shows. So I assume he was referring to me. Him, Tucker Carlson, a few others. They were.
He said he didn't give a crap that he was being surveilled?
Yeah, he didn't care. So that's what he said on air. But so that's the kind of nonsense that's been going on. And this was just a few months ago. I'd say 6 or 7, 8 months ago, this happened. So as a matter of fact, I was talking back and forth with somebody who worked with a guy named Palumbo. I'm not sure if you know him or not. He wrote a book about some deep state something or other. But that he was trying to iron out what the machinations were, how this was happening. And I said, hey, they're collecting all your stuff and they file it, I guess, when and they're actively, listening to everything for Bongino. And this wasn't that long ago. And Tucker too.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
It's troubling to me to think that you told someone they were being spied on and they didn't care. That sort of seems troubling, as if they're part of the issue. Do I get a wrong interpretation of that?
Well, I think his attitude was that he would come right out and attack him in his podcast. And he's pretty a guttural guy.
On his podcast he was. It seems in his job he's not.
Oh, yeah. I think he's turned on that switch where, before he'd be in his T-shirt that says, all different kinds of different sayings that there's some of them are New Yorky cute. Your guys that have some of those sayings up there in New York that like don't get dead, I think is one of them. It sells 1,000 gazillion keeps. I thought that, and he has that New York twang that you guys have, and that sort of a cutting edge. Almost obstinance to your
charmingness, huh?
Yeah, so it's but and it is kind of charming. This is a New Yorker, but now he's a deputy director of FBI, so he has to turn on that Mr. Professional switch, and he had to go out and buy a suit and tie apparently, which he never. I think if he had them before, he burned them, so he had to buy a couple more. So now he's Mr. Professional, and he's working for Patel, who who's his boss, and of course I still see Patel with with just an open shirt on, and so Bongino's Mr. Professional now. Even he said there's a lot of stuff coming down the line. So I'm the bottom line is I'm going to give him a little leeway and say, hey, yeah, there's an awful lot of stuff that you can go through, and the machinations are probably pretty in depth. But at some point, it's, I don't know, another 100 days or something. We need to see something. Or or you got to say, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, like I said, it's troubling to me to know that someone would know that and just, not care about it. Very weird to me. Let's talk a little bit of foreign policy, Russ, before we wrap up here. President Trump, obviously on his Middle East trip this week, he says he's dropping sanctions on Syria to move to a more normalized relationship with the country. What's your thoughts? As we were told this was coming, but he officially has done it.
Well, we talked about Syria in depth, I think, a while back in one of the podcasts, and that whole situation is like trying to juggle, 15 beach balls in a windstorm. It's quite just trying to figure out who is who and to what loyalties they have and that sort of thing. So, I think he's got to step very lightly. You got the Russians involved, you got the Israelis involved, you got all the different factions. You got the Sunni and the Shiite mix that's going on there. And you got the different religions that are coming up from the Lebanon. I would say tread softly. Now, obviously, the thing they're looking at is to ultimately isolate Iran, because I believe that they're right when they say Iran is probably getting close to having a nuke, and all those centrifuges that are buried deep down in the wherever, they're spinning night and day. So
real quickly on Iran. So when I did the show the night that Mike Waltz was let go, and the initial reports were, and still to this day, I'm told, now the audience got upset. Some of the audience got upset that I came out here and said Mike Waltz was fired, but that's what the reports were, and there's nothing to the contrary to believe that he wasn't let go of that position. Yes, he will be taking over at NATO, but or whatever. I think he was given a position NATO, right, or the UN ambassador, the ambassador to UN. Yeah. So it doesn't mean you can't be let go of one job and then given another. That's what the reports were, and that's what the reports are today. There's no inclination otherwise. So there were some reports that he was let go from there because he was reportedly working behind the scenes with Israel to provoke a war with Iran. And President Trump says, no, we're not doing that. I want to try to handle this thing amicably. I want to try to handle it diplomatically. I don't want boots on the ground in Iran. I don't want American troops being sent overseas anymore. We're done fighting endless wars. Enough is enough. And the whole world goes crazy. Anti-Semitism, this, that, you're anti-Semitic. And you're like, no, you're not anti-Semitic because you don't want war. Like make it make sense here, Russ.
Well, I agree that the mullahs, they want to stay in power like anybody else. They're hell-bent on, seeing certain things happen in the world, but they've got a stable, an unstable population that they have to worry about, and they're getting booted out there, or maybe hanging from a rope if under the right circumstances. So they have to have a heavy hand, and I think the president's right. If we have to put our own boots on the ground in Iran, we're going to have a whole lot of boys and girls coming back horizontal with a flag over a box.
Right. If Israel wants a war with Iran, you put your boots on the ground. You guys send your guys there. Why are we sending our brothers? Why are we sending your nephew? Why are we sending our brothers and sisters and our sons and nephews to go fight a war that's not ours? This is like the thing that it literally drives me crazy, Russ, because you can't talk about it. If you talk about it, you're anti-Semitic because we're anti-war. And Donald Trump really opened, I think, a lot of our eyes, especially mine, over the last 10 years about how senseless wars are. It's like beating a guy up who steps on your shoes in middle school. At the time, it seems like a good idea, but after you think about it, you're like, it's a pair of shoes. That was so stupid. And, we look at it and you're like, why are we fighting these senseless wars, especially not for our country?
Well, here's another thing. They say, let's go bomb these facilities. Well, we talked about the we might talk about the issue with our own Atlantis is of our own, but these facilities, when you go underground, okay, you might find the hole where the mole dug into the ground, but you don't know whether he went right or left, or whether he went down on an angle, another 20 feet, or in this case 200 feet, 300 feet, 400 feet, or whatever, then turned right, then turned left, then came back underneath of himself. So you don't know. Now there are some telltale signs that you look for in the intel field that I'm not going to talk about, but those are the things that you might use satellites for, or different types of technology to try to sniff them out, to find out where these things are. But it's very difficult. And even if you think you've sniffed them out, you might not have the right plot. Even if you put the mother of all bombs penetrator on where you think it is, it's very iffy at that point. So I think President Trump is right to try to coax them into negotiations, try to get them to give it up, give them certain guarantees, and keep our boys and girls from coming back horizontal, and try to get this done amicably without blowing up the world or having all our young people coming back destined for coffins and grave sites.
Right. And regardless of what Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro want to make you think, that doesn't make you anti-Semitic to think like that. It's just very logical thinking, that we shouldn't be sending our brothers and sisters into harm's way, into a war that has absolutely nothing to do with us. I also think it's very telling that Israel doesn't want to end the war, that Israel doesn't want peace. Now, let's not forget, Iran is also a country that said death to America. It's words. They haven't acted on their action. I don't think they are. They're very hyperbolic about the way they speak. I don't think they'll ever make a move, especially not with Donald Trump in office. And Donald Trump wants to ensure that they don't ever make a move. We're doing it the right way. So I think a lot of people are getting tired of Benjamin Netanyahu trying to force us into a war. And like I said, regardless of what Ben Shapiro or Mark Levin or any of the other war hawks, the John Boltons of the world tell you, it doesn't make you anti-Semitic to be anti-war. Very, very simple. We saw what America did to the Middle East and Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. We don't need another instance like that in Iran. And I think a lot of people are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel on that. Russ, before we wrap up, I want to get to sort of an interesting story. Tucker Carlson had this guest on her show. I watch Tucker quite often. He's a friend of mine and a good American, and another man who's very anti-war, I might say, who's been called anti-Semitic for his views on that. But had this guest on. It was sort of interesting. A lady who worked under George W. Bush, who had come out and said that America had built a $21 trillion building underground, a doomsday base that could eventually be used. First of all, how does $21 trillion get spent without anyone figuring it out? Let alone Doge would have found it by now. Sort of an interesting thing. Can you confirm or deny that something like this exists?
Well, think about the Pentagon budget where they say billions and billions are disappear, or they go wherever. A lot of that money gets put into black programs that they're funding, and they don't want to tell you that they used this amount of money for a black program. That's what the SAP program sucks up a lot of that money, and they don't want to tell anybody about it. And it's like, when they really push the issue, they bring them back. They say, hey, shh, this is for this, super duper program or whatever, and then the Congress, they cool their jets. So, but what, $21 trillion for an Atlantis? And I think she even said something about some of them are under the ocean.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like, whoa, like that's like the Atlantis that sunk and then buried itself into the stratosphere, or the I don't know, the under the ocean, whatever. This is just complete nonsense. I don't know who this woman is, but
her name is Catherine Austin Fitz, and she was this is what also doesn't make sense. She was the Assistant Secretary of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, between 1989 and 1990 for only a year. She bases it off of a Michigan State economist named Mark Skidmore, who released a report in 2017 stating that him and a team of scholars, I guess they were Doge before Doge, had uncovered $21 trillion in unauthorized spending in Department of Defense and housing and urban development from the years 1998 to 2015.
Well, okay, we know of some that facilities that are underground, like Red Rock or Raven Rock, that's just over the border from Maryland into Pennsylvania, north of Frederick, Maryland, and Fort Detrick, up that way. We know about Greenbrier, which is where the continuity of force was for Congress, which has now been outed, and that we know that it's no longer there. Well, think about this logically. If it's not at Greenbrier anymore, which is an underground facility, and a nice big hotel with opulent, and Red Rocks at 9/11, where did they fly the vice president, Cheney? They flew him to Red Rocks. Now, President Bush was on a plane at the time, and he stopped off at Offutt, Nebraska. By the way, that facility is deep underground too, at Offutt. But if you're in an emergency situation, just try to think of this logically. Are you going to put the vice president and the president in the same, gopher hole?
Probably not.
No. And then ultimately, if Greenbrier is not going to be able to handle, no longer the place for Congress, does that mean we've just decided we're going to let Congress just, get fried like everybody else? I think probably not. So, yes, we have other facilities that people don't know about. And I know of 3. And think about it. You might want to also have a Pentagon facility somewhere where they can run everything the DoD does away from the Pentagon, because that little courtyard in the center of the Pentagon, when I spend many a time there having a snack at the little cafe there. It's called Ground Zero Cafe. Well, it's called Ground Zero for a reason, because that's where all the missiles for the Russians and probably now the Chinese are targeted. So we need to have continuity. We need to be able to have command and control for the military. We need to have a president who can call up and say, I want this or that done, and hopefully not get fried in the process. And in case they do take out the president, we need a vice president who can take over for the president. And we need a government, that's been taken care of. There are facilities that we don't talk about. And I'm not going to talk about them other than what I've just said. But as far as the Atlantis under the ocean and another, city of whatever, Lord knows, Lord knows how many trillions of dollars, this woman is just plain silly.
Yeah, like I said, it's a cool story, but the fact that someone who was the assistant secretary of HUD would have some sort of information, that someone like that wouldn't have that security clearance to know that, right?
Well, I mean, housing urban, I guess you got to build a house somewhere. If you're going to build Atlantis, you got to have some houses. But think of the logistics that would.
You think there's roofs on these houses?
Maybe you can rent them out for the weekend or something, or for the week. Like you do at the Outer Banks in North Carolina or something. It's just total insanity. Even the logistics for what we have. You've got to have contractors. You got to have mining guys. You got to have the guys that drill those tunnels. Your subway there in New York, and the ones we have here in DC. And you got to pay them twice as much so they keep their mouth shut. And so they won't tell anybody what they're doing. And you got to have all kinds of people that know how to control air. You got to get air into these spaces, air in and air out. You've got to get fresh water in. You got to get waste material and waste water and waste everything out, and then you got to do it quietly so no one knows what. You got to get sources of electricity into facilities like this, and there's all kinds of logistics involved in building a nice little gopher hole somewhere. That even then, what you're going to have is kind of a rudimentary. It's not going to. President Trump, if he ever had to go to something like this, he's not going to find it as opulent as Trump Tower there in New York. It's not going to be quite as nice. So,
fair assessment, Russ. Like I said, I just thought it was an interesting story that I wanted to get your take on. Russ Tice, former senior NSA intel analyst and whistleblower, and great American, I should say, as the great Lou Dobbs used to call him. We'll talk to you soon, brother.
Thank you kindly, John. Have a good day.
Folks, thanks to Russ Tyson. Thank you all for being with us today. We hope to see you back here tomorrow for the Great America Show, where our quest for truth, justice, and the American way continues against all odds, against all haters, against all enemies. We'll see you back here tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, may God bless you, may God bless America, and may God bless the great Lou Dobbs. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night.